Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
You're still at that diner, right? The one with the pancakes. My uncle asked it loud enough for the whole living room to hear. I was 28, standing with a paper plate of potato salad at Michael's engagement party, and every head turned like I was the clown walking into a black tie event. My name's Lauren Myers. I'm 41 now. I live in Norfolk, Virginia. Back then, that wasn't even the worst of it. Not even close. The label started way earlier, and it never let up. Michael was always the golden boy. Tall, clean-cut, straight A's, soccer captain. The kind of kid they put on brochures. He got into real estate right out of college, started flipping houses, and suddenly, he was the family mogul. "My son, the developer," my mom would say, puffing her chest out like she built the damn houses herself. And me, I was the dropout, the ghost, the joke. That wasn't true, of course. But to them, I was the eternal waitress, and they ran with it like it was printed on my forehead. My mom, Patricia, loved repeating it to anyone with ears. "She's just not career-minded," she'd sigh, loud enough for Thanksgiving to pause. "But she's good with people, always has a smile." Then she'd pass the green beans like she hadn't just backhanded me in front of a room full of cousins. My dad, Robert, never sugarcoated it. Retired cop, voice like gravel. If I dared to mention school or ambition, he'd grunt and shake his head like I'd just spit on the flag. "You had potential once," he told me once after dinner, his plate still in front of him. "You just didn't stick." Didn't stick. That phrase sat on me like wet concrete, like all those years meant nothing. Like I gave up. At every birthday, wedding, holiday, I was the odd one out. Michael's friends showed up in pressed shirts and fancy watches. I brought wine and potato salad. No matter what I did or said, it got twisted into some proof that I was lost, behind, wasting my life. And every time I showed up, I thought, maybe this one will be different. It never was. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. I still remember one Christmas, standing in the kitchen, and Mom whispering to Aunt Karen, "She used to be smart, remember?" Before she dropped out. I wasn't even in another room. I was 10 feet away refilling the ice. All I could do was laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I'd stopped expecting anything better. I knew my place in the family script. Michael was success. I was the footnote. And the worst part, I let it ride for years. Let them say it. Let them think they were right. But that was all about to change. That moment hit me during Grandma's funeral. We were packed into that overheated chapel in Rockville. The pews creaked every time someone shifted. The smell was old wood and perfume and a little bit of grief. Everyone wore black like it made them better people. But the whispering never stopped, not even 10 feet from the casket. I was standing off to the side near the punch table after the service, just trying to breathe. My heels were killing me, and I was thinking about slipping out early when I heard Uncle Frank's voice behind me. "Still just a waitress, huh?" He said, like it was a joke, but there was no laugh. Can you believe she never finished school? 40 years old and nothing to show for it but a name tag. His wife clucked her tongue and shook her head like I was a stray dog that never got fixed. Frank kept going. "Patricia says she's in between jobs now. Probably means Waffle House cut her hours again." He chuckled, full volume, right behind me. No attempt to whisper. I didn't turn around. Didn't flinch. Just took a sip of warm ginger ale and stared at the stained glass across the room. But my ears were burning. The kind of heat that builds behind your eyes when you know they're all nodding and pretending they're better than you. Not one of them knew a damn thing. I glanced sideways. Aunt Karen leaned in, whispering something to Cousin Janet, both smirking. Yeah, they knew the story. The same story that's been passed around like stale fruitcake since I was 22. It was like they needed me to stay small so their kids looked bigger. I could have turned around. I could have said something, made a scene, told Frank to shove his judgment up his overfed ass. But I didn't. Not because I was scared. I wasn't. I just suddenly understood something I hadn't before. They weren't going to stop, not unless I made them. Right there, next to a bowl of sweaty grapes and some generic funeral sandwiches, something clicked. My stomach wasn't in knots. I wasn't even mad in the usual way. It was colder than that, cleaner. I watched Michael across the room shaking hands with the pastor, like he'd just delivered the eulogy himself. Mom was dabbing fake tears, clutching her pearls. Dad was outside, probably avoiding emotions with a cigar. None of them knew the truth. None of them even cared to ask. That was the moment I decided I was done playing along. This charade, this stupid, tired role they shoved me into, it was ending. For good. I had spent years letting their version of me stand unchallenged, and it was like watching someone wear your face like a mask and convince the world that it's really you. Not anymore. The funeral ended. People started drifting toward their cars. I hugged Mom out of habit. She patted my back and gave me the usual tight-lipped smile. "You held up well today," she said, like I was a child who didn't throw a tantrum. I smiled back, polite, but something had shifted. I didn't need to argue anymore. I didn't need to convince them. I just needed the right moment. The moment that would drop the floor out from under their smug little assumptions and leave them staring at who I really was. Not to hurt them, to end this once and for all. I knew the second I revealed myself, I wouldn't just be rewriting the story, I'd be burning the whole damn script. Timing was everything, and I was done waiting. 6 months later, I was sitting in the back row of the Naval Academy Chapel, watching my brother get married under the vaulted ceilings I knew better than anyone in that room. "Pretty cool venue, huh?" Michael had said in a family group text. Emma wanted something different. Different. Jesus. They had no clue. I'd spent 4 years marching across that yard in combat boots, getting screamed at by chiefs and instructors who could spot weakness from a mile away. That chapel had seen me at my worst, broken down, blistered, bone-tired, and now it was being used as a backdrop for Michael's highlight reel. The whole family gushed over it. Mom kept saying how classy it felt. Dad muttered something about tradition and honor. Nobody asked how Michael managed to book a military chapel when he'd never served a day in his life. Nobody thought to ask me anything at all. We sat through rehearsal. I kept my mouth shut. I smiled at Emma. I let Mom give me another once-over and adjust the neckline of my dress like I was some charity case. All while knowing the truth. That night, I went home to my quiet apartment, took off my heels, and opened the cedar chest in my bedroom. The air hit me like memory. Sweat, discipline, pride. I pulled out the uniform. My dress whites, rank still crisp on the shoulder. Ribbons lined up like teeth. Commander Lauren Myers. I ran my thumb across the bars. Each one of those had a story. Intel ops, forward deployments, special assignments that never made the news. I'd spent most of my adult life chasing threats before they ever reached our shores. And yet, to my family, I was still the girl who couldn't finish college. They didn't know I'd graduated from the Naval Academy with honors. They didn't know I'd run black site operations overseas and built networks that saved lives. They didn't know because I never told them. Part of it was the job. Most of what I did wasn't meant for holiday dinner conversations. But part of it, the bigger part, was habit. I let them believe I was nothing. It kept things easy, quiet, less explaining, less friction. But it wasn't quiet anymore. The funeral had flipped a switch, and now they were parading my brother through my chapel, bragging about his real estate business like he was some warrior of capitalism. I held the uniform up in the mirror. It still fit, still looked sharp. That's when I made the decision. Not to crash the ceremony, not to steal thunder. I didn't need to make a scene. But I would not leave that chapel without them knowing exactly where they were standing. In my legacy. I folded the uniform and placed it on the bed. The ribbon rack glinted under the lamp. Bronze Star. Defense Meritorious. A few that didn't even have names I could say out loud. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Let Michael have his moment. Let them all clink glasses and pretend they knew what success looked like. I'd give them the show they wanted. But when the curtain dropped, they'd see who had really earned that stage. The reception was held in one of those polished, overpriced halls in Annapolis. Chandeliers too bright. Chairs wrapped in white cloth like it made folding furniture elegant. People were sipping champagne and pretending their lives were fancier than they really were. I stood near the dessert table, nursing a glass of wine, watching guests pose with the bride and groom like they were at a celebrity meet and greet. "Lauren." Cousin Janet's voice cut through the hum. She walked up holding a mimosa, fake surprise plastered across her face like we hadn't grown up stealing each other's hair ties. She tilted her head. "You made it all the way from... where is it you live again?" "Norfolk," I said. "Oh, right." "Right," she nodded, dragging out the second one like she just remembered I existed. "And you're still at that restaurant, huh?" I smiled. "Something like that." She blinked, waiting for more. I didn't give it. Janet leaned in, dropped her voice just enough to pretend it was friendly. I always thought you'd end up in some big career. You were so sharp in high school. But hey, people find their path in different ways, right? Sure do, I said, eyes flat. She laughed awkwardly and backed off like I'd bitten her. I didn't even flinch. I'd taken harder hits during training drills with a busted rib. Another relative walked by, Aunt Marianne this time, and gave me the same curious half smile. You ever think about going back to school, sweetheart? I just raised my eyebrows and took a sip of wine. They circled like flies. Smiles too sweet, questions too pointed. Not one of them really cared what I did. They just wanted confirmation that I still hadn't figured it out. And then Michael walked in with his little college entourage. Loud, polished, smug. One of them wore a sport coat that probably cost more than my rent. They gathered around him like disciples, laughing too hard at stories I'd heard 100 times. He spotted me and lit up. Oh, guys, you've got to meet my sister. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the circle. This is Lauren. She's still in food service. The words dropped like syrup on a hot pan. Sweet, sticky, impossible to ignore. One of his friends smirked. Another chuckled and took a sip of bourbon. Michael kept going. Our eternal waitress. Keeps the family grounded. Emma was next to him, holding his hand. Her smile froze for a second, just long enough. Then she laughed along, soft, polite, the way women do when they're too embarrassed to call their husband out in front of strangers. I smiled, not wide, just enough to show teeth. Someone's got to feed the people, I said. Can't all be flipping condos. One of his friends snorted. Michael didn't catch the shade. He patted my shoulder like I was a dog who'd done a cute trick. Classic Lauren. I excused myself before the bile reached my throat, walked past the gift table, past the old uncles talking about football, past a waiter carrying a tray of shrimp cocktail. I wasn't mad, not in the way I used to be. What I felt now was cleaner, tighter, like the moment before a storm hits, when the sky holds its breath. They had no idea what was coming, and that made every dig, every smug little jab, feel like a countdown. Let them smile now, let them laugh. I was done playing the fool. I walked straight to the bar, not for a drink. I'd had enough of smiling through fake toasts and fake concern. The bartender was wiping down a shaker when I leaned in. Young guy, maybe early 20s. Sleeves rolled up, polite grin. Hey, I said quietly, slipping a folded note across the counter. Can you have this delivered to the man listed on the card? He's arriving soon. Just hand it to him on the terrace. Don't announce it. He nodded, glanced at the paper, didn't ask questions. Good man. I stepped outside through a side door near the cake table. The terrace was mostly empty, except for two smokers huddled near the edge. I kept to the far corner, eyes on the stone railing, watching the way the breeze moved through the trees. 10 minutes passed. Then I saw him, Captain Miguel Rodriguez, broad-shouldered, still walked like a man used to giving orders, dress blues crisp as ever. His eyes swept the terrace until they landed on me. Commander Myers, he said, voice low, firm. Heard there was a situation. I smiled, for real this time. Captain, I said, didn't think you'd come so fast. You pulled me out of a board dinner, he said, walking up to shake my hand. Figured it had to be important. We clasped wrists, not just hands. Combat habit, old respect. You remember Kandahar? I asked. He gave a short laugh. You dragged 2 wounded Marines out of a blown-out truck under live fire. Yeah, I remember. Same girl, I said. Different battlefield. He raised an eyebrow. Talk to me. So I told him. Not everything. He didn't need the soap opera. Just the basics. My family didn't know about the Navy, the academy, any of it. They thought I was a waitress. Still, his face shifted. Tight. Angry. You mean to tell me these people walked past your service for over a decade like it didn't happen? I nodded once. He shook his head slowly. That's a level of blindness I can't process. They're not blind, I said. They're willfully ignorant. He leaned against the railing, crossed his arms. Why now? They chose this chapel, I said. My chapel. He's the groom. He called me eternal waitress 5 minutes ago. Rodriguez didn't answer right away, just looked back toward the glass doors behind us, where laughter spilled out like static. What do you want from me? He finally asked. I turned to face him fully. I want it to end, not with me yelling, not with a scene, but with truth, delivered clean, precise, from someone they can't ignore. He didn't blink. You want me to speak? At the right moment, when it matters, when they can't walk away from it. Rodriguez nodded once, sharp, decisive. Done, he said. You just give the signal. I'll know it when I see it. He looked me over again, not checking me out, just seeing me. The full version. The one I kept buried for too damn long. You should have worn the uniform, he said quietly. They don't deserve it yet, I replied. His jaw tightened. I'll be standing by, he said, and walked inside. I waited 5 seconds, then followed. Time to let the show play out. I slipped back into the reception hall just as the best man wrapped up his toast. And to a lifetime of success, love, and maybe even fewer golf lessons. He finished with a smirk. Everyone laughed. Glasses clinked. I kept to the side of the room. Captain Rodriguez was already in position near the rear, close to the archway leading to the terrace. His posture said relaxed. His eyes said ready. The maid of honor took her turn. She kept it sweet, talked about Emma's childhood journals and how she once wrote Emma Myers in bubble letters before she'd even met Michael. The room swooned. I sipped my drink, counting the beats. 1, 2, 3. Then Michael stood and reached for the microphone. He tapped it like a game show host, grinning wide. All right, he said. Guess it's my turn. Scattered applause. Emma gave him a soft smile from her seat at the head table. Her cheeks flushed. She had no idea what was coming either. I just want to thank everyone for being here, Michael said, pacing slightly. Emma and I are blown away by how many of you came out to support us. We feel the love. Another round of claps. I didn't move. He launched into some generic praise for their friends, the wedding planner, the parents. I watched him switch tones like a seasoned performer. Every word polished, every beat rehearsed. Then his eyes landed on me. And of course, he said, I have to thank my sister Lauren. He raised his glass in my direction. I didn't move. She's been such a consistent presence in our lives, he continued. Seriously, no matter what's going on, rain or shine, success or struggle, Lauren's always been there. The room quieted slightly. People sensed something coming. In fact, he said, chuckling to himself, she's kind of the rock of the family. He looked around for backup laughter. Lauren's our eternal waitress? There it was. The air changed. A couple of nervous laughs popped up. Someone at the far table actually coughed. Emma's smile froze like glass. She shot Michael a look, but he didn't see it. He was too busy loving the sound of his own voice. I mean, he went on, who else do you know that can survive off diner tips for, 15 years? That kind of dedication. That's rare. More awkward shifting. My father looked down at his drink. Mom blinked hard and gave a tight, confused smile like she wasn't sure if she should laugh or not. I sat perfectly still. Didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just stared straight ahead, heart steady. Michael raised his glass again. To Lauren, for reminding us all that you don't need ambition to be reliable. That was it. Captain Rodriguez was already moving. He stepped forward before the clapping could start. His shoes hit the floor like a hammer, sharp, measured, impossible to ignore. The mic hadn't even been set down when his voice cut through the room. Michael Myers, he said, loud but calm. Michael turned, surprised, still holding the microphone. I think it's time someone correct the record. The room went dead silent. Rodriguez stepped fully into the center now. All medals and command presence. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-word. Michael blinked. I'm sorry, and you are? Captain Miguel Rodriguez, he said. Commandant at the United States Naval Academy. Former Field Operations Chief. Task Force Red Echo. And former commanding officer of Commander Lauren Myers. The mic slipped slightly in Michael's hand. He looked confused. Then something darker crept across his face. Panic. Wait, what? Rodriguez didn't pause. Lauren Myers, he said to the crowd now, voice clear, is a decorated officer in the United States Navy, graduate of this very academy, leader of classified intelligence operations across multiple theaters, Bronze Star recipient, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, over 2 decades of service to her country. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People sat straighter. Heads snapped toward me. I didn't move. Rodriguez kept going. She's not just a commander in title. She's commanded lives, saved them, risked hers to do it, and she outranks most people in this room, including myself before I retired. Michael's face was draining color. Emma had both hands over her mouth. The groomsmen stood frozen, suddenly unsure of where to look. Rodriguez pointed to the front table. And while her family laughed and labeled her eternal waitress, she was out there serving in ways you couldn't begin to understand. A wine glass shattered somewhere behind me. My mother. I didn't turn around. Rodriguez's eyes scanned the room one last time. "You wanted a toast?" he said. "Here's mine, to Commander Lauren Myers. The real definition of service, sacrifice, and strength." He stepped back. Nobody clapped. They were too stunned. Exactly how I wanted it. Michael still held the mic, but his grip looked weak now. Fingers twitching, eyes darting from Rodriguez to the crowd, then back to me like he was trying to make sense of it all. The room wasn't quiet, it was stunned. A heavy, breath-held silence wrapped in scattered murmurs and clinks of glassware. Captain Rodriguez didn't move an inch. His voice came steady, locked in like a laser sight. "She didn't tell you because her job required silence," he said, looking straight at my parents now. "Not because she lacked ambition. Not because she failed. Because her career involved classified operations protecting this country, while you were asking if she wanted fries with that." A sharp gasp to my left. Aunt Karen. Janet's hand covered her mouth like she just watched someone die on stage. Then the real moment hit. A wine glass slipped and exploded on the floor behind the cake table. My mother. She stood frozen, arm halfway raised like the glass had just vanished from her hand. Eyes wide, mouth slack. Rodriguez stepped forward once, just enough to own the space. She served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Eastern Europe, and multiple black site locations I'm not authorized to name, he said. She led reconnaissance intelligence teams. She negotiated on-the-ground operations with allied forces. She extracted wounded under fire and pulled classified data out of hostile zones before it could be burned. The whispering started now, hot, fast, contagious. Lauren. She was in the Navy. A commander. Rodriguez didn't break. She earned her Bronze Star during a combat extraction that saved 8 lives, he went on. She earned her Navy Commendation Medal for leading a multinational joint task force on an operation that, frankly, half of DC still doesn't know happened. He turned toward Michael. And you tried to reduce her to a punchline. Michael looked like a balloon slowly losing air. Shoulders sagging, face pale, one hand still hanging in the air like maybe he could take it back. All of it. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Rodriguez wasn't done. She graduated from this very academy, he said, sweeping an arm toward the high arches overhead. While you stood here today acting like this building was just a pretty place to say your vows. A few guests shifted in their chairs. Some looked down at their hands, embarrassed they'd ever laughed. Others stared at me like they were seeing a ghost, one they should have known, but never bothered to ask about. Rodriguez faced the crowd now, voice calm but razor sharp. "Do not confuse quiet with failure," he said. "Do not confuse humility with lack of achievement. This woman gave her life, her entire adult life, to serving this country in ways that kept your lights on while you slept peacefully. She never asked for thanks, she never demanded respect, but she deserves it." I felt my jaw lock, throat tight, not from nerves, just the weight of being seen, really seen, for the first damn time in decades. Rodriguez turned back toward me and gave a single crisp nod. Then he addressed the room one final time. "If anyone in here still wants to call her eternal waitress, I suggest you check your rank first." A deep silence dropped over the reception like fog. Michael took a step back from the mic. Emma was seated, arms crossed, no longer smiling. He tried to speak. "I didn't know," he muttered, eyes to the floor. Rodriguez looked at him like he wasn't worth correcting. Then he walked off, not dramatic, just direct, through the glass doors and out to the terrace like nothing more needed saying. I didn't follow, I didn't have to. The work was done. As Rodriguez stepped outside, he caught my eye one last time and tilted his head toward the mic. My turn. I stood slowly, didn't rush. The room was dead quiet, not out of politeness, but because every single person knew something had just cracked wide open. I walked to the front. Michael stepped back like I was radioactive. I took the microphone. My voice came out steady, calm, controlled, not shaking, not shy, just done hiding. "I didn't lie," I said. "I just didn't correct you." Half the family flinched like I'd slapped them. I never said I was a waitress. I never said I dropped out. I never said I was a failure. You just filled in the blanks the way you wanted, and I didn't stop you. I looked directly at my mom, then at my dad, then at Aunt Karen, Janet, all of them. My job required secrecy. Most of what I've done can't be Googled. I worked in intelligence, special ops, covert joint missions with allies across the globe. I gave over 20 years to this country, and every step of the way, I lived knowing I couldn't come home and brag about it. Mom's face was pale, her hands twisted tight in her lap. Dad looked like someone had kicked him in the chest. But while you were trading stories about Michael's real estate closings, I went on, I was writing letters to mothers whose sons didn't make it home. No one moved. You called me a waitress like it was some punchline. You joked about my ambition, like you knew a damn thing about what it means to serve. But I did more before breakfast than most of you did in a decade. Janet looked down. Uncle Frank had gone stone silent. And Michael, I said, turning fully toward him now. He stiffened. You wanted honor. You chose this place, the academy, because it looked noble. You thought standing here made you important. His mouth opened slightly, but I kept going. You didn't know it was already in the family. You didn't recognize the very values you claimed to chase, service, sacrifice, discipline, because they were right in front of you. You just didn't look hard enough to see past your own reflection. Michael stared at me like he'd just realized I was a stranger. Or worse, someone he'd underestimated into nothing. I turned to the guests. I didn't come here to hijack a wedding, but I also didn't come here to keep pretending I was less than I am. Right then, Rodriguez stepped back through the doors, just in time. He cleared his throat. If I may add one more thing. I nodded. He faced the room again. 2 months ago, Commander Myers led a mission off the Horn of Africa, a hostage situation involving American contractors, classified op, 14 lives at risk, 0 casualties. A few gasps, one audible, "Oh my God," near the back. Rodriguez looked at me, then back to the crowd. That mission alone could have earned her another commendation. But she didn't even tell her family, because that's how much she values duty over recognition. The final piece clicked. You could feel it. The collective gut punch. The truth landing with full weight. The shame was everywhere now. On faces, in dropped eyes. In the silence that had gone from stunned to full-on guilty. Good. Let them sit in it. I didn't need revenge. I needed this. Truth, laid bare. No debate. I handed the mic off without a word and walked back to my table. For once, they didn't look away from me. They didn't know how. I hadn't even made it back to my seat before Aunt Karen was on me. She didn't say much, just gripped my arm and whispered. I had no idea. Her eyes were wet, her voice cracked. Then she backed away like she wasn't sure if she had the right to speak to me at all. One by one, they came over. Cousins, uncles, people who hadn't looked at me twice in 20 years now mumbling apologies under their breath. Some gave hugs, others just nodded like they couldn't find the words. I let them talk. I didn't say much. They needed to sit in it a little longer. But my parents, that was different. They found me outside near the Valley Circle once the crowd started thinning. The music was still playing inside, but the reception was clearly over. Nobody was dancing. They were just watching me like I'd dropped a bomb and walked away from the crater. Dad was the first to speak. I didn't know, he said, voice rough. Lauren, I didn't know. His hands were jammed deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched like he was bracing for a hit. I'd seen him like that before, after a funeral once. Never for me. Mom stood next to him, clutching her purse like a shield. Her mascara had run, and for once, she didn't care. You were at the academy this whole time, she asked, voice barely audible. All those years, and you never said? You never asked, I said. None of you did. She winced like I'd slapped her, but she didn't deny it. We just thought you were figuring it out, she said. We didn't think you wanted to talk about your life. I didn't want to lie, I said, but I sure as hell didn't want to be laughed at. Dad took a step closer. I'm proud of you, he said, chest tight. Damn proud. That cracked something in me, not enough to cry, but enough that I let the words hang there longer than I needed to. They stayed outside with me for almost an hour, asking questions, real ones, about missions, about training, about what I did, where I went, how I lived. They didn't interrupt. They didn't judge. They listened. It was a start. Later that night, Michael found me near the coat check. He looked wrecked. His tie was undone, his eyes bloodshot. His shoulders slumped like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. "I don't know how to apologize," he said quietly. "Then don't," I said. "Just stop pretending you know what success looks like. Stop measuring people by the surface." He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I thought I was doing everything right," he muttered. "You were doing everything loud," I said. "There's a difference." He didn't argue, just nodded again. And for once, he shut up. That was enough. 3 months later, Michael's marriage was over. Emma walked out 2 weeks after the wedding. She didn't give some dramatic speech, just packed a bag and told him, "I didn't marry a bully," and left. He didn't fight it. Couldn't. Turns out, once the crowd stops laughing, you have to live with what you said, and she'd seen enough of who he really was. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't say I told you so. I just stayed quiet. Some lessons hit harder when no one softens the landing. Meanwhile, my dad started calling me once a week. Lunch on Thursdays. He'd pick the diner, always the same one. And we'd sit in the corner booth like old friends swapping war stories. He'd talk about walking beats, pulling night shifts, chasing down suspects in Baltimore back when crime felt personal. I told him about Kabul, about freezing in Intel trucks, about bad calls that got close to worse outcomes. He listened. I did too, and we laughed. For real, not that stiff, careful way we used to. My mom surprised me the most. She joined a military family support group in Norfolk, started volunteering, showing up to deployments, helping with childcare for enlisted spouses. One night, she called me crying after attending a welcome home ceremony, said she finally understood what service really looked like. For the first time in my life, I believed her. There was no more pretending, no more smiling through insults or shrinking to fit their version of me. I didn't walk into rooms afraid of what they might say. I didn't need to. I'd spent years trying to be two people, the daughter they could accept and the officer they didn't know existed. But that split was gone now. I wasn't living undercover anymore. Not for work, not for them, and not for me. I was whole. One name, one story, one truth.